You're listening to The Mark Cox Show. Find everything Mark Cox at 971talk.com/Cox.
When it came to the Clinton email investigation, you mentioned the characterization that you'd been asked to accept that this was a matter and not a criminal investigation, which you said it was. There was the matter of President Clinton's meeting on the tarmac with the sitting Attorney General at a time when his wife was a subject to a criminal investigation, and you suggested that perhaps there are other matters that you may be able to share with us later on in a classified setting. But it seems to me that you clearly believe that Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, had an appearance of a conflict of interest on the Clinton email investigation. Is that correct?
I think that's fair. I didn't believe she could credibly decline that investigation, or at least not without grievous damage to the Department of Justice and to the FBI.
Comey yesterday was scathed a little bit on his accounts, and as we talk about his motives, etc., rather than stepping up publicly or confronting the president, he says he gave his friend permission to read his memo to the New York Times. That's an unorthodox way to behave.
An unorthodox way to behave where?
An unorthodox way to behave in this situation.
There are a lot of unorthodox people then in this White House and past White Houses.
Hey, this is Chris Arps, again, substituting for Mark Cox. Those were a couple of clips from yesterday's James Comey Senate testimony hearing. And we're going to bring in our next guest, Horace Cooper, who we had in when I guest hosted Monday. And Horace, let me read his bio right quick. Horace Cooper is an adjunct fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, co-chairman of the Project 21 National Advisory Board, and legal commentator. Horace taught constitutional law at George Mason University in Virginia and was general counsel to U.S. House Majority Leader Dick Armey. Horace, how are you, sir?
Hey, it's great to come on the program.
Hey, no problem. Hey, we're going to give you the prize, my friend. You called it Monday when you called it Monday when you said that this Comey hearing was going to be an absolutely nothing burger, which it happened to be. Give us your initial thoughts.
Well, there was a lot of space that the media wanted to run that the facts just didn't allow. They were kind of caged in, and so was James Comey. It probably would have been a lot easier for James Comey if there hadn't have been such a quick hearing held. I wouldn't have actually thought it merited having a hearing in Congress, but once he was put under oath, he was completely pinned down with what it was that he could actually give answers to. And a number of reporters, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, were required in real time to update existing stories that they were already on their websites for people to see, to say, oops, not accurate. It is not true that James Comey will challenge that he had told the president 3 separate times that the president was not a target or subject of any investigation. It is true that he was not. And also, it is not true that what the media called obstruction of justice or some effort to prevent an investigation of the Russia probe or related campaign member activities to the Russia probe. It is not true that James Comey would say that President Trump tried to stymie those as well. I think if there is a takeaway, it is that James Comey turns out to be not the Boy Scout, but someone who is prepared to push and pull as hard as he is pushed and pulled. Not a neutral party, not a person simply doing his job, but a person with an agenda, a person with an idea of how to manipulate the process, and someone who had shown himself capable of doing that over time. This helped to reveal that. But when you're talking about the substance, what will we now learn with regard to why the president is unfit to continue holding office? It was a complete nothing burger.
Horace, you are an attorney, a legal scholar, a longtime Hill staffer and watcher. It seems like the big question that is coming out of these hearings yesterday is are James Comey's memos, are those his personal memos or are those government property? And is he liable to prosecution for leaking government property?
Okay, so two separate questions. One is, I think it is overwhelmingly obvious that the documents that he created were in fact government property. He acknowledged under oath that many of them were created while either in a government vehicle, heading back to headquarters, using government equipment, and updated and maintained while actually on the job. Without a doubt, this would constitute that. And instead of being handwritten or even typed on a word processor at home in his on his personal computer or on a diary, these documents were in fact the kind of thing that he said when he was creating them. He wanted to make sure that they could be publicly accessible, or more, not publicly, broadly accessible, so that they wouldn't be limited by containing classified material. Now, there's a reason for that, and that is because in his job, he invariably has to segment the kinds of information that he obtains that is classified and the kinds of information that he obtains that is not classified. This is not a distinction between personal and private. It is a distinction between what kind of work information can be shielded from public scrutiny and what kind can be broadly disseminated. So to answer that question, it's clear these were the federal government's documents, or at least the FBI's.
Okay.
With regard to the decision to disseminate that information, it appears to violate privilege, and which is the idea that communications between the administration and other members of the administration should not be shared or disclosed without the permission of the executive. And thirdly, there are protocols that every FBI agent, all the way up to the director, agree to adhere to, which is that they will not knowingly disclose information that they have obtained exclusively through their efforts as government employees to non-government employees. Does that constitute a crime? I would say it may not reach the level of crime, but it clearly is not the work of a Boy Scout, is not the work of someone coloring inside the lines, and if someone knew that an FBI director was engaging in this, they too would probably have to stand up and hold a press conference where they talk about how serious this breach was and what a threat to the Department of Justice, the way he did when the former Attorney General met with the former president. Whether that's a crime or not is a different question than whether or not it was a serious breach. This was, in fact, a serious breach.
You know, Horace, my initial assessment of the Comey's testimony yesterday is I believe that he leaked those memos to his friend early so they can inflict maximum damage at that time, because he knew that he was going to probably be testifying before a Senate or House hearing, and his testimony was going to be a dud, which it was yesterday. And so he was just trying to get this stuff out and inflict maximum damage. And something I just remember, which is really disturbing, and I want you to talk about, is there any legal consequences for Comey? Maybe it's the same question, where he leaked those memos to try to spur a special prosecutor. I mean, that was one of the bombshells from the testimony yesterday. So
you are on to something. When you talk about why the actions that this individual took, we have to ask ourselves, where does the authority to take the action that he occurred come from? There is no statute, there is no practice, And as a former prosecutor, a high-ranking member of the Department of Justice in the Bush administration, and the FBI director, and a sitting officer of the court, he had special duties, ethical duties. Rule 3A of the ABA requires that he not undertake actions that would undermine the ability and trust that the public has that an investigation or any criminal action is occurring in a fair and neutral and dispassionate way. In other words, a prosecutor, let's just use this very clearly, a prosecutor could not take a subpoena, get access to all of your personal emails, and then secretly leak those personal emails in tandem with discussions about whether you've committed other crimes as a way to make you look like a bad person.
Right.
But this is what he admitted to under oath. So we do have a problem where it may not be, and again, I stress this, it may not be a crime what he did, but it is clearly not legal, acceptable, and appropriate what he did. And it shows that he is a lot like the very thing that he claimed he was standing up to fight against when he gave the press conference about Hillary Clinton's husband meeting with the Attorney General.
Right. Horace, sure do appreciate your taking time out of your schedule and giving us your expertise. And as I said, my friend, you called it Monday. I mean, you said we're not going to hear anything new. He's already testified against all this stuff, and it's been a big nothing burger.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. And that was Horace Cooper from Project 21. When we come back from break, we're going to take some calls on the Comey testimony. We can take some calls about the Confederate Memorial going down, Senator Bob Onder's bill about the next session. Anything you want to talk about to the top of the hour, you can catch the show on Twitter at MarkCox971, Facebook.com/The Mark Cox Show.